Hey folks, Seth Leibson here. It's that time of year again. Guns Etc. huge anniversary event. This year it's on Saturday, October 24th only. There'll be tons of giveaways and one-day only discounts in the store. Over the years, this event has turned into a gathering of folks who love America and the right to bear arms. As you know, our world may dramatically change on November 3rd. Can you imagine what a Biden-Harris administration will do to the Second Amendment then? If you're concerned about that, make sure you visit Guns Etc. on Saturday, October 24th. For more information, go to gunsetc.com. And if you like these monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Well, welcome back and happy Wednesday, October 28th, 2020. Less than a week before our election, a few things still amaze and surprise. First, throughout the campaign, Joe Biden said he decided to get into this race when Donald Trump praised white supremacists. This would be the press conference where Donald Trump said, quote, "We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence," close quote. This would be the same press conference where Donald Trump said, quote, "I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally," close quote. Not one reporter in this campaign, not one, has asked Joe Biden about his deciding to enter the race based on a slander, a myth, a lie. Second, it is amazing to me the press corps, every chance it had in one-on-one interviews with Donald Trump, kept asking if he would denounce white supremacists, though he clearly had done it at least 10 times before. We've played the audio. The press corps knows he did, and using and promoting and covering Donald Trump as they have for years before he ran for president, they knew, too, they were not using and promoting and covering a racist or a bigot. And they knew also he did not all of a sudden become one when he became president. What they do think is that all Republicans are racists and bigots. They've been trying to hang that slander on our neck for decades, be it Barry Goldwater or Ronald Reagan or George Bush. They did it to John McCain and Mitt Romney. They do it now. It's the worst form of politics and journalism, and it goes on. In fact, asking about what you know not to be true, it isn't actually the worst form of journalism. It's simply not journalism. Third, what's become clear to me is as the Democratic Party has moved further and further leftward, the media has traveled with Joe Biden. I don't mean physically. There's not very many places to go, after all. I mean what I said yesterday. It's not that Joe Biden is a centrist on some kind of even or constant plane. It's that he's always been in the center of where the Democratic Party was. When the party was opposing busing and dragging its heels on civil rights and in the grip of a lot of segregationists in the 1970s, he was with them. When it moved toward a thwarting of anti-Soviet efforts to stymie the Reagan doctrine, he was with them. When it was a Dukakis and Liberal Party represented by organizations, including the National Organization for Women and the ACLU, he was with them. When the Democratic Party was dragged to the center by Bill Clinton and Joe Lieberman and the Democratic Leadership Council in the early 90s, he was with them. When it lurched back portside with Barack Obama, he was with them. And when the progressive project of grooming and growing an ever-leftward movement in America, fomenting the rise of your Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes and Ilhan Omars and Rashida Tlaibs and Nancy Pelosi embracing all that, he was with them. That's what the media moved with, too, for the media was always an institution of Democrats. We should not be surprised it has become an institution of far leftism now, because that's where the Democrats are. That is where they are because that is who they are. If we're grooming students to go into public policy and they become your Tlaibs and Omars and Cortezes, why would you not have that same crop of students, indoctrinated as they are, filling jobs in the media and education institutions? This is how you get to a place where a journalism school fires a radio director, a student whose crime is citing to a New York Post article. Now note the cover-up of the Hunter Biden emails, also broken and reported by the New York Post. And like any self-respecting authoritarian movement, the story is disappeared, uncomfortably akin to how truth-tellers and regimes from the Soviet Union to Iran to China today get and got disappeared. Forced disappearance has been defined as, quote, occurring when a person is secretly abducted or imprisoned by a state or political organization or by a third party with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of a state or political organization, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the person's fate and whereabouts with the intent of placing the victim outside the protection of the law, close quote. Anti-Biden stories and reports and reporters are sent to metaphysical gulags, not to be heard about, not to be acknowledged. Which gets me to the fourth amazement and surprise. In any other year before now, if you had a candidate running for president whose son was in the position of that Hunter Biden is in now, with the credible and public witnesses and sources you have around that story, the media would be camped outside Hunter Biden's home and continually asking the candidate about the story, perhaps almost as much as Donald Trump has been asked about white supremacy. If you want a story that's been debunked, or fully debunked, and that has been used as a smear, the words Joe Biden uses about the story about his son, it's the story of Trump and white supremacy. If you want a story that has not been debunked and is in fact not a smear, it's the Joe and Hunter Biden story. Fifth, I'm not sure if the journalists are confident or engaged in information and thus voter suppression when it comes to the polls, but there is now a unanimity of polls that shows Joe Biden in the clear lead, according to the mainstream media. According to the mainstream media. There's not a unanimity when you break it down. John Zogby, a Democratic pollster who in years past was everywhere, thinks the race is a two-point race. The Trafalgar polling group has Donald Trump winning. And just today, I read this over at National Review, quote, Jim Lee of Susquehanna Polling and Research echoed some of Trafalgar's points about shy Trump voters being missed by pollsters. He said, quote, there is a definitively submerged Trump vote. Asked for a prediction, he hedged a little, but then predicted a Trump win. Quote, I can't call it. If the turnout is going to be what I think, though, Trump wins it. Lee goes on. Pollsters may be deliberately overstating the strength of Democratic candidates in order to dampen Republican turnout. He calls it the very definition of voter suppression. This has been my point, and I suppose we won't know for certain until next week, but most major polls do partner with major media organizations. Think ABC, NBC, CBS. Those are the polling firm's clients. And if it turns out Trafalgar was right, or Zogby was right, or Susquehanna was right, or any of us who have been speaking of the silent Trump voter, then yes, I do think the continual drumbeat that Donald Trump is massively unpopular and likely to lose is a narrative of voter suppression, meant to create a theme and storyline, just as it has been meant to keep calling Donald Trump a racist, just as it has been in disappearing stories about Trump's successes, especially on foreign policy, just as it has been pushing myths of nonviolent protests, just as it has been blaming Donald Trump for the spread of a virus that no president has ever been blamed for when analogs came on their watch, as in 1957 or 1968. When you are told continually one product is the best, people are more apt to buy that product. Or at least that's the thinking and point. When you are routinely told one product is the worst, people are more apt not to buy that product, which gets us to the really big question. Are we strong enough, big enough, independent enough of a country or a people to look at and listen to everything the culture throws at us in our education system, in our entertainment, in our professional athletics, in our corporations, in our news media? Are we strong enough, big enough, and independent enough to take all that, all those slings and arrows, if I can dust off my Hamlet, and by opposing, end them? That is the question. And it's the question of being, of saving this, the last best hope of Earth. Power, we are classically taught, is the ability to be and make things be. In the contest between patriotism and culture, where is the true power in America today? We will know the answer to that question in a week or so. If patriotism yields to culture, we will face 1,000 or more shocks, but that's the contest, patriotism versus culture. In a better day, this was not a question. Patriotism suffused the culture. They were one. That changed. The progressives knew all this, and so they went after what we took for granted. And you have something more. You have the task of trying to explain all of this, constantly pushing back, constantly correcting, in two major ways. Those who are the ardent believers, those who, in other words, want to radically transform America, those who listen to a Patrice Coulors and Alicia Garza and agree with them, and those who are there along for the ride because it seems like a good ride. That second group, those along for the ride, they're not fully at fault. They blithely take in what the New York Times says or what is given them as pedagogy in the schools and assume it right or true or mainstream. We have to fight and push against both the first and the second groups, however, the ardent believers and those taken in by them, those along on the ride, so to speak. There's a lot more to say about all this, but sticking with the theme of what the patriotism is that I'm talking about, it's twofold. The rejection of tyranny and the appreciation of freedom, what Ronald Reagan called an informed patriotism. So we enter the final week of this election somewhat agog. As Ronald Reagan put it in 1964, there's only an up or down, up to man's age-old dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant heap of totalitarianism. If you want to see the latter, look at Portland. Look at Philadelphia. Look at what was done to our social media accounts. Look at what is done on our campuses. If you want to see the former, look at those places that are not Portland or Philadelphia yet. If you want to see what the modern mindset can do, now consider how we all started what we started so nobly here in this country, in Philadelphia, and look at what it has become. Those are the stakes. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.